Hello everyone, it's your Professor Lisa Gabrielle, and I'm here today to present to you week 4 and talk about week 4 activities. Okay, so here we are on the home page of the online classroom. And by the way, I'm still holding those open lab hours on Thursday nights, but not too many of you are takers on those lab hours, a few. But I just wanted to remind you I am here on Thursday nights face-to-face if you need some help on things. Okay, so let's drill into the coursework for week 4. I posted that yesterday. And just so you know, my schedule in terms of posting course content, I was able to post the first 3 weeks on the first week of class, but now I'm going to be posting materials weekly, so I will be posting those materials by Tuesday of that week, and then the lectures by Thursday of that week. Hopefully this lecture will be posted tonight, which is Wednesday, and then your projects will be due and your work for that week will be due on Sunday. So that's kind of the rollout. So Tuesdays I post materials, Thursdays I post lectures, and Sundays you submit your coursework for that particular week. Okay, so let's jump in to week 4 here. And, probably should review this listing out here as I usually do. Up at the top you have a reading for this week, which I'm going to discuss here momentarily, and you have a quiz that you'll be doing, which is part of that reading. You also have a handout, which is dealing with HTML structure and starting to introduce to you some visuals so that you can start understanding how HTML and CSS work together to create web pages. And you also have a lynda.com assignment this week, which this week you'll be working with the Up and Running with HTML module, and you'll be completing section 2 and 3 of that module. And then, of course, if you have any questions, you can post those questions in the week 4 problems and solutions. So let's go ahead and drill into that week 4. And here I have your handout, the simple HTML structure handout, and I have that open over here. And what this is showing you is a visual of a web page with no content in it, but the structure is drawn out for you here. Okay? And I'm going to be talking a lot about HTML in this lecture today. And you'll be doing a lot of reading about HTML, and you'll be doing a lot of watching tutorials about HTML, as well as some lab activities. And one thing I would like to point out about HTML is it's critical in order to develop a web page that will broadcast on the internet. And the reason for that is the HTML language is what the web browser reads and hence displays your page to the viewer. In tandem with HTML, you have another language that's used to display web pages, and that is the CSS. Okay, so HTML is what we use to create the structure of the web page, and HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And you can kind of see in this example here, along the edge here, is the code that goes into putting this wireframe together over here to the right. Okay. And I call this a wireframe because there's really no graphics in it. Basically, it's just mapping out the structure. And over here along this edge is the CSS language that would be used to create the presentation of the graphics that we will eventually populate this web page with. So you've got 3 components kind of going on here on this handout. You have on one side of the page over here, you have the HTML structure. Over here in the center of this handout, you have the visual of this code structure. And then over here along the right edge, you have the CSS that will create the presentation of the graphics within that structure. And in essence, that's basically what goes into most web pages, are those three elements. The actual HTML code, the actual visual of that HTML code, and then the CSS to make that visual come to life and look, you know, beautiful and colorful and graphical like we all expect web pages to look. So you can kind of see how putting together a web page isn't exactly straightforward. There's a lot of tools involved. There's a lot of understanding of all kinds of different areas of web and web design that kind of go into putting a page together, which is why for the last couple of weeks you've been watching tutorials on Photoshop and generating graphics and such, and then last week you watched some tutorials on the entire process, which I thought it was important that you at least saw from start to finish where you were kind of going in this class, and then starting this week kind of taking it apart bit by bit and starting to build web pages from, you know, this point on. You will have a project where you'll be building a site from scratch, but right now we're still learning from exercises, so that's mostly what we'll be doing this week as well. So take a look at this handout. Hopefully that starts to put things into a visual space for you if you've been sort of wondering, how's all this going to come together? Okay, so let's jump back to the week 4 activities, and also after the handout there I have your reading and quiz assignment. And basically with this you are to come in here and go ahead and click on the first link here, which is the W3 Schools website. And I'll go ahead and click back here. I actually have it up, so I'm not going to click from here. I'll go ahead and click back here. I've got that link up. And when you click it, you'll end up in here. This is kind of like the starting page of the W3 Schools. And the W3 Schools is a comprehensive reference manual for most things web. If you look across the top, you'll see that it covers HTML, it covers CSS, it has JavaScript here, jQuery, XML, ASP.NET, PHP, SQL, and more. These are all of the areas of web design that one could study, possibly. A lot of the front-end design, which is what this class is about, is generally covering the HTML and the CSS, the presentation, the look and feel, the graphics, the design, the marketing, the user interface, the user experience. All of that kind of stuff is considered like the front end of web design. Anything beyond those particular areas we kind of classify. You could maybe put JavaScript in the front end. We won't be doing any JavaScript in this class though, but any of the other stuff which would be considered things like databasing and any of the server maintenance and coding for server languages are all considered the back end, and that would be things that take place once a viewer clicks a link or goes to a specific page or makes a certain request. Certain back-end functions take place, and that's generally the area that is reserved for the types that are more program-oriented and enjoy coding from scratch and keying in code. I myself personally am more of a designer and have been more involved with the front end of web design, so we're going to focus more on that in this class. But we still have to learn some coding languages, and HTML is one of them. It's not necessarily the hardest language to learn, but at first it can be overwhelming. So here on this HTML basics page here, you can get started in reading about all of the things related to HTML, and it gets started with an introduction and goes through all of the basics and the tags and the language itself. So it's kind of a fun reading. It's not necessarily like sitting down with a book and reading you know, paragraphs of information about stuff. It's more like a user's manual. And the nice thing about it is for every area or specific tag, it actually has an example. Like for instance here in this HTML heading, which you can click here on the try it yourself, and over here it will have an example of the code, and then over here it'll show you what it looks like in the web browser, which is kind of nice. It gives you the code and then it gives you a visual, and this is really a helpful tool for all of us visual learners out there, such as myself and hopefully a lot of you. So get in there and start reading through some of this information and trying it for yourself, playing around. It's very interactive. There's a lot of links and things, but you want to kind of keep yourself within the W3 schools. You can click off of the W3 schools in a lot of areas accidentally just by following certain links in here. They always spruce it up with advertising and such, but if you stick with the next chapter button and just continue through all of these sections here, you should be able to get through this content relatively quickly. And again, you're more or less reading a reference manual. So it's not necessarily reading, it's just looking, trying the techniques for yourself, trying to follow, the brief descriptions that they've given you there and such. Okay? And then when you're finished with all of that, you're going to read through all, whatever of these, however many are here, are listed from this point to this point. You'll read through all of the chapters, and then you'll scroll down to here where it says HTML quiz, and you'll click the HTML quiz, and it says right here start the HTML quiz, and basically it's only 20 questions worth 20 points, but I'm going to give you 50 points. But what you have to do is you have to answer the questions and you have to score at least an 80%. And the nice thing about this quiz is you can take it over and over and over again until you score 80%. So you have several tries, or as many tries as it takes for you to read the questions, answer the questions, and then score for the quiz. At the end, when you finally answer the last question, it will give you your score. And what I'd like you to do at that point is to capture your screen. If you're on a PC, I believe there's a print screen button that you can hit. And since I'm on a Mac, basically to do a screen capture on the Mac, it's Command-Shift-4. And it gives you this crosshair here, and you just select the region, and you can kind of hear how it makes that camera sound, like a shutter sound. And then out here on the desktop, oops, 11 here, it will put a capture of that. Let's see. Let me see. Let me look in the listing here. Okay, so this, it put a screen capture of what I just captured there, and it'll tell you the percentage that you scored on the quiz. Okay, and then you're going to go ahead and take that PNG. In my case, it was a PNG. I think print screen on the PC might make a JPEG or a bitmap image. Either one of those are fine. You can submit. Okay, then you'll come back here into the classroom and click on the Submit Week 4 Reading and Quiz, and you'll click that link there and scroll down to where it says Assignment Submission. You'll hit Browse My Computer, and you'll go out to your desktop or wherever you put that print screen. In this case, it was on the desktop. Grab this and add it here. In this case, you know what you want to do? I'm sorry, before you do that, do not attach. Okay, I'm going to remove that. I'm going to go out here to the desktop and find that print screen. Here it is right here. It's this one. Okay. And I'm going to quickly name that print screen with my name, my last name, L. Gabriel, _ quiz, which is QZ, quiz .png. Okay? All right, so I've labeled it. So now when I come back here into eCampus and hit Browse My Computer, and go over here, I've got the file labeled lgabriel_quiz qz.png open. Okay. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to submit that. You could say, you know, here's my quiz. Thanks. All right, hit submit, and you'll submit that to me for grading. Okay, and if you do all of that, you'll get 50 points. Hoo-ha! Okay? All right, so it'll take you a while to get through all this material and maybe a couple of tries to get an 80% on the quiz, but it's important that you review this material before you delve into the lynda.com. It'll be helpful. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of this. All right. Let's go back. Let's cancel. Okay, so I'm going to go back to here. Okay, so let's scroll down here to the lynda.com assignment. So for this week, you're going to be changing to another module. And the module for this week is up and running with HTML. Okay, and I have Lynda open back here. And again, just to review, you'll go up to your My Courses tab, you'll pull down to Classes, and I happen to have several classes running. You'll click on the Up and Running HTML module. And that will open up this module for you. This is where we're going to be working today, this week. Okay? Now, looking down here, you'll be doing the Section 2 and 3, Basic Page Structure and Formatting Page Structure. Okay? Now, instead of turning in individual exercises for this module set, you'll be completing a lab, and the lab is built in to Lynda. So just let me show you quickly here. I'm going to scroll through this. Okay, so here is my Section 2, and here is your Section 3. Okay, notice that after you watch these 5 videos for Section 2, it gives you a lab. Basically, it gives you a blank document, and you have to create that document based on the instructions. Okay, now what does that lab look like? Well, I have it back here in Dreamweaver, and I'm going to pull it up here and show you. So basically, your first lab looks like this. It basically is an HTML document called intro.html, and you'll open that here in Dreamweaver, and you'll proceed to follow the instructions 1 through 7 and finish this lab. Okay, and when you're finished, I believe it will look like this. So this is the starting file, and this is the finished file. Okay. All right, so that's that lab. And then over here, under the Section 3, Formatting Page Content, there's another lab, and that's called Controlling Your Page Content. And I have that open here. Also, as part of that lab, it gives you an instruction sheet. I'll click on that here. And it will go through 1 through 6. All of these instructions based on what you watched in the tutorials, and you are to follow all these instructions and produce. You'll be producing a series of files for that lab. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, oh, that's my own. You'll be producing 5 files for that second lab. Okay, so those are the files you'll be turning in for a grade. Are those 5 files that you produce for that lab. And then for the first one, you'll just be turning in 1 file, which is your intro.html. Okay? So going back to here. So what I'd like to talk about next is, in order to produce those labs and in order to start getting familiar with Dreamweaver, I recommend that you actually use Dreamweaver instead of the text editor that they recommend in these labs. I believe they call it, what do they call call it here. Let me see.
Once you know the basics of structuring an HTML document, it's
stop this here. I think he's using an HTML editor that is free online. Okay, but instead of using that HTML, he calls it Komodo. He's using Komodo editor, which is a free downloadable editor. And if you want to use Komodo, you can. But I would recommend start getting familiar with Dreamweaver and use Dreamweaver as your HTML editor instead of Komodo. So what I would like to do is just do a brief overview of Dreamweaver with you today so that you can start getting familiar with the tool, because eventually you're going to be using Dreamweaver to put together your original websites. Okay? So I kind of have it already open, and I have those exercise files opened up here and such. But basically, I'd like to go over some of the important areas that you're going to probably find useful when using Dreamweaver as your editor for this week's lynda.com activities. Okay, when you launch Dreamweaver, you're going to probably have just a... I'd hate to close all this down, but I believe you're going to have a... Go to the preferences here and see if I can turn that up. Show welcome screen. Okay. Let's see if it's going to show it here. Okay. It doesn't look like it's going to show the welcome screen. Maybe. No. Okay. Well, I tried to turn it on, and I don't really want to quit out of all these files because I might reference them while we're in this demo. So basically, when you launch Dreamweaver, you're going to get a welcome screen. And in that welcome screen, it's going to ask you, what do you want to do? And what I would suggest you do is, it kind of looks similar to this, the welcome screen, is to begin with a blank HTML if that's what the tutorial is telling you to do. Okay, it'll ask you what you want to do, and chances are most of the time you're going to start with a blank HTML, but not always. Okay, but before you start opening files and start working with HTML files, there's something that's very, very important about Dreamweaver that I'd like to go through with you just slowly, because unfortunately I love lynda.com, but some of the people that do those tutorials go way too fast. And I'd like to go slowly with you through how to create a site, because that's what I would recommend you do before you get started with going through your tutorials for this week, is to actually create a site of this week's tutorials so that you have them all organized in a specific area. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. And I guess I'm going to go ahead and close out all this, okay? Because I know where it's all at, and I should be able to get back to it. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of all this. It's just, I always try to optimize these videos and make them as fast as possible and have all the files I possibly need open. And when I have to close them, then I have to remember where they are on the fly. And sometimes that's not the easiest thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of all these and don't save. Okay. Here we go. All right. So we're going to get Dreamweaver to now look like it should look when you first launch it. So when you first launch Dreamweaver, it'll look very similar to this. It's going to ask you, what do you want to do? And as I said, more than likely, you're going to create a new document and just click New, and it'll create a new HTML document. Okay, that's what I was talking about earlier. However, if you have a collection of files that you're working with and you'd like to keep it organized, and you'd like for Dreamweaver to know about all of those files and to help you keep organized, what I would recommend, and what Dreamweaver recommends, is to create a site. So what we're going to do, and I've already done this once, I have created a site, and this is how I've been working through a lot of the tutorials myself, and I'm just going to go over that with you. Okay, so in your freshly launched screen here, to get started in creating a site, you first would go into, over here you have this dialog box that's to the right. Okay, I'm going to move it in here. So it's kind of a little inactive. Okay, so you'll have this panel, and for the most part you're going to work with some common panels over here to the right in this area. And some of those common panels, or at least right now, the most common panel that you're going to work with is the panel called Files. So if you click that, up will come your Files panel. Now, you may not have anything in here yet, so it may not look like mine, but I'm kind of showing you mine because it has been populated. I've been using Dreamweaver for quite a while now, so I have quite a few sites in here. So you may not have anything. Okay, but you will create sites from this panel. There's actually several places you can create sites, but the most common way to create a site is to click the Files panel here, and up will come this dialog box, so to speak, or Files panel, which is kind of an offshoot. It branches off from this file icon here. Okay, you can also create a site from up here. If you pull down where it says Site across the top, you can also go New Site from here. So you can go New Site from here, or you can pull this down, this Files panel, and you can go Manage Site from here. Okay, so if you go Manage Site, it lets you add a site here. You can create a new site here, or you can come up here and go New Site from here. Okay, so there's two ways to do it. There's actually another way. I can't remember how that's done, but it's somewhere in here. But those are two most common ways. I usually use this panel, but this might be a little easier for purposes of demonstration. So we'll use this. So we go Site and we go New. Okay, now considering that you have back here in lynda.com downloaded all of your exercise files. So before you start doing your lynda.com videos, you need to download your exercise files, and I'm pretty sure you guys are already familiar with how to do that, so I'm not going to go over that. But you need to download those exercise files, and you need to move them to the location of where you're organizing all your exercise files. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at what I have. Okay. So over here on my desktop, I have a folder for spring, okay? And inside that spring folder, I have another folder called web design, and that's you guys. That's this course that I'm building online here. Inside the web design folder, I have a folder called Lynda Exercises, okay? Now, you might have a hard drive, and on that hard drive you may have a folder that's called, you know, web design, and inside the web design folder you may have the similar setup where you have a folder with your Lynda Exercises, which is what I have here. And if you turn down the handle here, you'll see that I have downloaded the exercise files for the several modules we've been working on. Okay? So knowing that I have the structure kind of already set up in my on my desktop or on my hard drive, it's important that you get yourself set up in a similar fashion on your hard drive or your flash drive or whatever it is you're storing your homework files on. Okay? Because this is going to become important in a minute here. Okay, so back to here. Okay. So now that I am in Dreamweaver, I am going to create a site which is basically acting as a link to that location that I was just pointing out, which is where all of the exercise files live on my hard drive. Okay, so I'm going to call that, for purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to call that DW. No. We'll call it lynda.com exercises. Okay? And that makes it pretty simple. lynda.com exercises. And this name is really only for your reference. So it could be all caps, all upper and lower, however you want to name it. It really doesn't matter. It's really for your reference. All right? Now what's important is this local site folder dialog box right here. And in order to populate this, you need to click this little folder right here. So click this folder. Now what it's going to ask you is, where is your lynda.com exercises? So you need to choose a folder where those are located. And I just showed you where I have mine located. I have mine on the desktop. So if I click on the desktop and then scroll down to Spring 14 NLC, and then web design, and then lynda.com. Okay, so basically what it's asking me for is what they call in web design the root folder. And the root folder and the site folder are basically the same thing. All right, so the folder that is housing all of your materials for lynda.com or all of your exercises in this particular example is your site folder. So we're going to go ahead and select that folder and hit choose. And that's what I would recommend you do with your lynda.com exercises before you get started. And then go ahead and hit save. Now I already have done this once, so that's what this message is telling me, is that I already have this set up somewhere else in my site. Do I want to do it again? And I'm going to go ahead and say okay. You will not get that message because you don't have this set up. You're doing it for the first time now. Okay, so now if I click over here in my files area, I'm going to get a wheel. And we're going to kind of wait. And sometimes, depending on how many files are in your site, you may have to wait for a little bit for the Dreamweaver to kind of read in all the files that are in that location. And that's what's happening right now, is Dreamweaver is reading in all those files in that lynda.com exercise. Okay, so we are waiting for it to do that. There it goes. Okay, now it's going to come up with this, and it does this every time, updating the site cache. And it will go through and scan all the files that are in that folder. And it really is best if you just let this go and scan through all those files, so that what Dreamweaver is doing at this point is looking through all those folders in that Lynda exercises folder and recording the names and the paths of all the files in that folder. So sometimes, depending on how fast your machine is, this process may go quickly or it may take a while. In this case, since I have several exercise files in there, folders and individual files, it's taking a bit to do. So we'll go ahead and sort of wait this out. While it's doing this, okay, because I hate to waste time making these tutorials. I could talk about a couple other things here in Dreamweaver. Let's see, I'm going to go ahead, let's see, it won't let me do anything while I'm doing this. So for purposes of this demonstration, I'm not going to wait for it to scan everything because I really need to kind of move forward. So we're going to hit stop. It's not going to hurt anything. It's still going to display properly, but it really is best if you let it go. Okay, so now let's pretend it finished. All right, and what I have now is a folder up here in my files panel that is named lynda.com exercises. Okay, and if you just pull this little line here, hover over it until you get an arrow, if you can kind of see that, I don't know, right here, and pull this out so that you can actually expand it so you can see all the names. You can see now that what is showing in Dreamweaver is exactly, let me double click this here, okay? So here's my lynda.com exercises folder, and here are all my exercises. Now let's go over to Dreamweaver here. And if you look at what we have in Dreamweaver, we have exactly the same thing. So we have lynda.com exercises, and then we have all of those exercises listed. Okay? All right, just so that's understood. This is your file structure on your hard drive, and now this is your file structure in Dreamweaver. All right, so now you've got them married up. You've got the link connecting what you have on your hard drive to what you're working on in Dreamweaver. So now, instead of going back to your hard drive, instead of going back here and going into your exercise files and double-clicking these exercises from your desktop, you're now going to actually activate those files from within Dreamweaver. So now I'm going to go in to the exercise files for the up and running with HTML, and I'm going to open up, let's see, I had, let me see if I can remember what I had open here. I'm just going to go, because I know I had a whole bunch of them opened up over there. And let's see, reference, which was that? Oh, okay. So these are all the files I had open, let's see, earlier. Yeah, these are all the ones right here, okay? I also had one more, and I believe that one was in, let me see if I can open it up here. Is it design, web? Yeah, I think that's what you guys were watching. And which one was it? Hold on a second here. This is why I didn't want to close all those files, because I knew I would forget which files they were. So hold on, let me, okay, so we were working with section 5 and 6. So it was up here. And maybe it was this one. Okay, 5 and 6. Yeah, I think it was building. Yeah, okay. I think it was 4, because that's where it gave. Well, anyway, I think we can use this here. Okay. All right. Anyway, I couldn't remember exactly what files I had open, so that's what that was about. But you can kind of see how I'm actually opening up. You can sort of see what I'm doing here. I'm opening up these exercise files, and I'm able to see the HTML documents over here in Dreamweaver now. And I could just double-click those HTML documents, and it will open those HTMLs straight up in Dreamweaver. Okay, it looks like. Let's see. Ah, there it is. Okay, I knew I'd find it. All right. So that's what I wanted. Build structure, create. Okay, so this is what I was looking for here. Okay, so you can sort of see how I just double-clicked it and it opened it up over here. So now we could talk about some of the aspects of Dreamweaver, now that we sort of understand the site. So it's very important that you first, before you get started on your exercises for this week, that you create a site and link your Dreamweaver to your structure and your folder structure on your desktop of your exercises. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do. The second thing is let's talk a little bit about the interface. Okay, it's very similar to what they're using in the tutorial, the Komodo, in that all it is basically an HTML editor. But it's a little bit more sophisticated in that it has several tools that help you to work with HTML in a lot simpler fashion, meaning that it gives you some visual cues as to what you're looking at. Okay, so what we're looking at right here is this structure right here, and if you remember, this was sort of reviewed last week when they went through quickly how to start building a web page and how to break down that web page into 3 different areas: your header, your content, and your footer. And over here on this side, this is your visual representation on this side, and on the left side over here you see a bunch of code. Okay, and this is what makes an HTML editor nice, because you're able to see the visual aspect of a web page on one side and look at the code on the other and make corrections and edits and see it in live mode. Okay, So you can kind of see over here in this code area, and it'll be talking about what all this stuff is. So I'll just briefly point out. Up here is the start of your HTML code, and all of these areas will be covered in your readings and in your tutorials this week. And then this area here, starting with the style tag, style type equals text/CSS, from here down to the closing tag for style here is your CSS. This is the presentation code that will make this page come alive. Okay? Right now there's nothing on the page, so the CSS isn't displaying much other than color. Okay, those are the only three things that CSS is really displaying for you now. And then below the CSS, starting with the body, is all of your HTML structure. So basically all of the box areas here that you see, and the division, the white space between each box area here, is the HTML structure. And it's called out by these divisions. So these divisions are what divide the sections of your web page from one another. And all of those divisions take place in the HTML code. And then the CSS calls out to those divisions and, presents them in a fashion that you choose. Whatever it is you choose as the designer to put in the CSS, then you call out to these divisions and you say, hey, container, you're supposed to look like this, or hey, header, you're supposed to be doing this, and such. Of course, it's a lot more sophisticated than that, but for a quick overview, that's what I want you to kind of pick up from this, is that that's how the web page is sort of broken down. It starts out with a bit of header information in terms of HTML, and then it renders all of the CSS presentation code, and then it displays your structure, your HTML structure. Okay? All right. And this view that you're looking at right here is one of three views that you have to work with the Dreamweaver. Up here in the upper left-hand corner, you have the code view, which if I click this code, it removes that visual and it displays my entire screen. Actually, I can go ahead and click this up here, and it'll kind of tab in as well as this here. There. Okay, so these will get out of my way here. I just tabbed them in here. So this is looking at all the code all at once. And if you notice here, looking at the code view, that you have these color coding things going on, this makes it so much easier to be able to read code than just having it all in one color. You're able to pinpoint, the different areas of the CSS versus the HTML and so on. Okay. When you're in split code view, that was the view we were just looking at, where you can see your visual on the right and your code on the left. And then the design view takes away the code and only shows you the visual aspect. Okay? So that'll be useful in doing your exercises as well. The other thing that you will be probably using quite a bit is the browser viewing. Okay, so as you start developing code and as you start adding tags and working through CSS and all of those different things, you're going to need to verify whether or not your page is looking properly, like it should look, by viewing it in a browser. Okay. And up here, along the top here, in the same area, next to the three areas where you can view the code, the split, and the design, is a icon, and I'm going to go ahead and circle it, and I can also hover, that you can pull down, and it will display your page, your HTML page, in one of these selected browsers. Myself, I am someone who works a lot in Chrome and Safari since I'm on the Mac. Some of you may be on the PC. maybe it's better for you to work in Internet Explorer and Firefox or Chrome. I suggest working in Chrome. It's been pretty consistent for me. So I'm going to go ahead and display this page in Chrome. And right now, all you really see at this point are the 3 sections that have been determined by the div tags and the CSS, the blue, the green, and the header, the content, and the footer, or the blue, green, and the purple divisions. Okay, so it's important that as you're working through the exercises that you periodically look at your pages, and the instructor in the tutorials will tell you preview your page, and it will ask you to look at your page in a browser, which is what I just did there. Okay, if I jump back here, you also can look at your page in live view, which is sort of like a browser built in to Dreamweaver. So looking at the page in live view, it pretty much looks like it would look as if you were porting it out to a browser. This is for people who are working on machines that don't have internet access and they still need to preview their files in a browser type setting. This live view in Dreamweaver is kind of equivalent to doing that, the same thing, looking at it in the browser. But since you have internet access, at least I hope most of you do, taking an online class, you can go ahead and port it out to the browser. It also mentions when and where the live view is handy, and I think it did talk about live view last week during those tutorials, and you may find yourself going back to those tutorials once you have a better understanding of HTML, CSS, and Dreamweaver. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the live view. So the split code mode is my favorite, and the area here for viewing your pages in the browser are pretty handy. The other area that you might find useful are this area down here across the bottom, which is your properties panel. And notice down here you have 2 tabs, one in HTML and one in CSS. And I'm not going to get into what these do specifically, and we're not really going to do much with them, other than I'm going to say that there are some properties that you will set down here on the HTML side. Like, for instance, a lot of times what I use this for the most down here is for making hyperlinks, which are text that's clickable that takes you to another page or to another website on the internet or what have you. That's what I use this field down here. At least that's what I use these properties for the most. Although there's other areas that I do use, but I'm not going to get into those today because this is just a quick overview. The CSS also, some of the most popular areas I use on the CSS tab are the page properties and setting some of the defaults for how a page should look. We will get into that again later on, so I just wanted you to know that the page properties is popular in the CSS area, and under HTML, the link area is probably my most common reasons for accessing the properties panel. Okay, and the last place that I want to point out in Dreamweaver that you might call attention to is the CSS styles panel over here. Okay, and when I click that, notice this flyout panel comes out. This is going to be the area that you're going to control a lot of the CSS presentation information that you apply to web pages. And it's a specific area designed just for CSS. So all of the CSS work that you do, once you've built your page structure and you have all of your HTML all set up and ready to go, and everything in place, as well as once you've created all your graphics in Photoshop and saved them out and are ready to be, placing them into your document, you'll come in and start working with the CSS styles. And we'll get into that later on in the course. But for right now, I just want you to know that this dialog box over here is where you will control most of your CSS. And again, if I haven't said what CSS stands for, if you haven't read it yet, it stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Okay, so basically, these are sheets that styles for each area of your website are applied. Okay, so that's where you'll find that. All right. Other than that, I think that is the only areas you really have to concern yourself with right now in Dreamweaver is the, the viewing of the code in the design modes, the browsing. You may use a few of these features down here, but I don't think so. I think most of what you're going to be doing this week is hand coding over here in the code window and then displaying over here in the design window. Okay, and then shooting it out to the browser. All right. Now, I believe to open up your files, I don't know if I reviewed this. I'm going to do it again, but over here you click on the Files panel, and you kind of migrate out to the folder, Exercise Files for Up and Running with HTML. And we're going to be working on Chapter 2. So you'll come in here, and based on what the tutorial tells you, you'll open up your HTML files from here. Okay, so if I come down here to the lab, for instance, for the Section 2 lab, you will open up this intro file right here. Okay, if you double click this, this is your lab, and it gives you the instructions, tells you, what you need to do, and then you'll go ahead and do it, and it'll be displayed here. If you get lost or stuck or whatever, don't worry. You have the actual finished lab here, which shows you what you should end up with after you finish with the lab. Okay. Sure, you can turn those things into me finish without doing the lab, but it's really not doing you any good. You really should go through this lab slowly and do it so that you understand how to make these divisions. Okay. So that's the Section 2, and then Section 3, you'll come over here, and I believe your labs are located here in the 03_10 folder. And if I go through, if I double click here in the 03_10 folder, notice here that you have a text document. I just double clicked it, and these are your instructions for that lab. Okay. So these are your instructions, and then all of these are the files you're going to need to open up. The intro.html, links, next, reference, and syntax. So you'll need these 5 HTML documents to go ahead and complete this lab. Okay? So hopefully that all made sense. I had to go through it kind of quickly, but I believe as you start reading through your materials and start watching your videos, some of this stuff might start to click in your mind, and you might start getting excited about making web pages in this class. So I guess good luck with everything, and post any questions you may have in the week 4 problems and solutions, and talk to you soon.